Welcome to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. I'm Kathy, and this season is dedicated to exploring the unique world of raising boys. Parenting boys today can feel like trying to crack a complicated code, a mystery, especially when it comes to understanding their inner emotional world. Together, we'll dive into real life stories, share practical tips, and uncover insights to help you and your son thrive, not just survive. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's unlock the parenting code, one boy at a time. Welcome back to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. I'm your host, Kathy, and today I'm excited to welcome Sabrina Trobak. Sabrina is a registered clinical counselor and the author of Not Good Enough: Understanding Your Core Belief and Anxiety. With a master's degree in counseling psychology, she's worked as a teacher, a vice principal, and a school counselor before establishing her private practice. Sabrina is also the mother of two adult sons. She transformed her parenting approach when they were 9 and 10, focusing on fostering the core belief of being good enough, important, and valued. She now continues to support her boys from afar while helping others reshape their self-perception through counseling and public speaking. Sabrina, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
So let's jump right in. And can you start by sharing a little bit about whatever story is behind that turning point where your boys were 9 and 10, like when something shifted for you as far as parenting, what it looked like and the impact?
Sure. So I was a learning assistant teacher. And then towards the end of my teaching career, I started as a school counselor. And I went to a 3-day workshop on suicide that was presented from that perspective of not good enough. At the end of the 3-day workshop, I just thought, this is what I need to do. I need to learn more. The presenter was a man named Tony Martins. And so I contacted Tony after, told him I wanted to learn more about the model of therapy, and asked him if he would take me on and train me in his model of therapy. And he agreed. And it was at that point where, you know, you got to practice what you preach. And so if I'm going to be teaching this model of therapy, I need to live it and believe in it as well. And so, I slowly, I think probably even before that, my core belief was changing a bit, but it didn't have as profound an impact as it did once I actually kind of knew what the model was, understood how it worked. Then I was able to really challenge my core belief, which then allows me to create a different core belief in my boys. My core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued. It makes it really challenging for me to teach my boys anything else. So I had to find that within myself. Then I was able to support that more and more within my boys.
So what did that look like? Like, how did it change? How did it change your relationship with your boys? What impact did it have, on the daily goings about of being a mom?
It's a lot of subtle things that you don't really even notice. Being a parent and with my core belief not good enough, I didn't believe I was a good enough parent. And I was trained in education. I was a learning assistant teacher. I had a lot more skills than a lot of other people who don't have that training in parenting, but I still doubted myself. So I was needing to kind of prove that I was a good enough mom. Well, what does that look like? Doing everything for my kids, solving their problems for them, kind of, over parenting. Or then I would get frustrated and I'd kind of back right off. That was about me and my belief, not really about what was best for my boys. So being able to sort through and understand that, I was much more able to just be present and really look at what my boys need as opposed to what I need to get validated from them. I was more able to be present and figure out what they needed and help and support them. And a big part of that was also around the emotions. I didn't even realize we were supposed to really feel our emotions. They were just these kind of annoying little things that kind of popped up like dust bunnies sort of things, and you just sweep them back and you're ready to go on your way. Understanding the importance of emotions, I was able to start talking more about emotions with my boys in a lot of different areas and a lot of like even just reading stories or whatever it might be, where we're able to talk more about those things. So they got more comfortable in being able to identify and feel their own emotions, which is huge for everyone in our society, but especially for men in our society. We're very much taught, suck it down, pretend it's not there, be tough kind of thing. So for them to be able to feel those emotions was a very significant piece for them in their kind of health journey as well.
Can you break down a little bit what those, like really, a little more detail on what the core beliefs are and why they're so deeply ingrained? Like you said, you have to be aware. So where does that all come from, and what
You
are
know,
they?
right. And so it comes from just kind of hearing about it, right? I heard about it at the workshop. Before that, it never really clued in to me. As a counselor, when I'm seeing my clients, a lot of my clients are saying, oh, wow, yeah, that's what's been going on. But I never even knew that. I didn't even realize it was there. Because that core belief is that quiet, unconscious voice that's in the back of our heads, kind of saying, I don't think you're quite good enough for that. I don't think you can quite handle that. Creates that self-doubt, that insecurity, that needing to kind of be defensive and keep people at a bit of a distance. And it started honestly before you're even born. If we look at parents, if I have two parents whose core belief are not good enough, not important, not valued, they're going to teach their children that. Not purposefully, they're usually not even aware it's going on, but the way they react, the way they respond, the way they handle things, the way they cope with stress, all often reinforce and create these patterns of behaviors that then get passed down to our kids. So it's this thing that's been going on since before they were even born. It's pretty hard to be aware of it. It's that significant. It's kind of like blood flowing through your body. You know it's there, but you don't really ever stop and think about it or feel it. That core belief can be that significant is it's a major drawing force. We're constantly trying to prove to ourselves that what we believe about ourselves is true. So that core belief is always there, pushing our perceptions, our relationships, our connections, but it's often so unconscious we're not even really aware it's there. So it makes it really challenging to do anything about it.
So it's interesting to me because one of the things most prominent in the work I do is talking about and recognizing unconscious gender bias. And again, it's one of those things until you are aware of it, you it's just it's not part of your it's not part of your world that you recognize, but it's always there and it underpins almost everything, every interaction that you have. So how much do you think like cultural masculinity shapes those core beliefs that you're talking about?
I think pretty significantly in the idea of it being a social norm in itself, but also the social norm is what parents have as their norm, so they end up creating that social norm through themselves as well. And we see it, everywhere. My boys grew up playing hockey, and at one point, my son, when he was younger, wanted to put pink tape on his stick. And this was, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, and he got teased for having pink tape on his stick. And that was by another kid who, didn't understand why that was an issue, but his dad teased him about it or whatever it is. And so it just became this projection that just continued over and over and over again.
Yeah, I remember when our son was 2, we had some professional photographs done, and it was a place where they had costumes and things that you could have for your child, and I dressed him in a really beautiful pink tuxedo, and I thought it was gorgeous. Like there was, you know, but I definitely had reactions like, "What are you doing?" It floored me a little bit, but it very definitely is part of our culture and it has been normalized. So many parents struggle with helping their sons to express their emotions, like you were saying. And especially because in society they're taught, you have to toughen up your boys, don't let them show signs of weakness, or you will create a child, a boy who will be bullied, who will be teased, who will be ridiculed. And so, in order to kind of help him fit in with society, these norms are perpetuated. So, as a mom, did you have any moments where you had to challenge your own beliefs about parenting boys and what the boys should be, and your beliefs about masculinity and parenting, any things you had to unlearn when you were going through this process of core beliefs?
Uh, I think I was pretty lucky. My mom and dad were pretty open about, girls can do girl things, boys can do boy things, girls can do boy things. So I didn't have it as significant as a lot of people, but there definitely was some stuff there, especially when it came around. Oh, I don't want them to get teased or are bullied in the school. So outside of what I see, so we had to like have some conversations about, you can do whatever you want to do, but it's also important to remember that it has an impact on people around you. So we talk about those consequences and help him try to make decisions that were there was a more rounded knowledge of the possibilities of what could come of it. So then he was more prepared for his decisions. They usually still decided to do what they were going to do, but they would have felt even more prepared in being able to handle that for sure. Um, I don't think, I think my lack of willingness to talk about emotions with my boys wasn't so much the gender bias as it was I wasn't good at feeling my emotions.
Yeah.
So, as parents, our kids are struggling, our kids are feeling emotion, that creates emotion in us. If I don't want to feel my emotion, I need to make my child feel better. So I need to fix the problem, minimize it, try to just make them feel better in whatever shape or form it is, because then if their emotion goes away, I don't have to feel mine. So that's more where I was guilty in. I would feel emotion when they were feeling emotion. I didn't know how to handle their emotion because I didn't even know how to handle my own emotion. So I needed to quickly try to kind of make it better, minimize it, make it not into as big of a deal, rather than just acknowledging that, yeah, you should be feeling your emotion. That makes sense, whatever it might be. I failed my social studies test. Well, yeah, that sucks. And it's okay to feel your emotion around that rather than, oh, don't worry, you can do an extra test or you can talk to the teacher or whatever it might be. You'll make it up on the next one. Just feel it. And so I had to really work on myself and get a lot better at my being able to understand and feel my emotions. The more I was able to do that, the more I was able to be present with my boys when they were feeling their emotions.
A lot of parents, myself included, struggled when their boys first started, public school or, from, the younger years, kindergarten, grade one, grade two, grade three, in that time period. And part of it is the school system, the way it is. Part of it is a lack of understanding about how our boys, how they learn and how it's different than how little girls learn. But what I find still is that a lot of boys during that period, and I think it's because the environment in the school is the way it is, they they will take a kind of a nosedive in their self-esteem because they're not as good as the girls. They can't compete with the girls. Most of their teachers are female, so they're not relating that way, and their self-esteem can really take a hit during those times. Did you have any experiences like that with your boys?
My boys did pretty good in school, but I definitely saw that a lot as a learning assistant teacher.
Hmm.
And I think a big one for that was just the movement.
Yeah.
Boys like to get up and they're physical and they like to be moving around and sitting in a desk
Yeah.
for 5 hours a day. It just goes against everything. Whereas little girls, that's more kind of, again, social stereotypes of their place. So it's more comfortable. You go out at recess, you see the boys running around playing soccer, playing baseball, playing tag, and the girls are all sitting on the sidelines watching them or, doing something, smaller physically. So I think that pigeonhole of you need to sit in your desk and do this makes it much more challenging for them to be able to really, for us to be able to even really understand what's fully there and what they're really capable of, because they're so busy just trying to keep their behavior under control and
Yeah.
their ants in their pants, that it's harder for them to then express the knowledge and the understanding that they really do have.
Yeah, I know from being a classroom teacher as well, I would be astounded that the little boys, in my kindergarten class or, in the lower grades, they would go out for their, 20-minute recess and it would be constant movement. Like there would be no stopping. And they seemed to know what they were doing as far as games went, but constant movement. And it just made me really aware of how much effort they must be putting into the normal day inside the school in order to contain that in because it just explodes when they have the opportunity to get it out. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Very,
it's quite a
very different.
conundrum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I remember when my boys, I'm not a mother of girls. I just have two boys. And I remember the first time my boys, we started hanging out with another family that had girls. They got invited to their first girl birthday party. They were young, maybe 6 and 7 or something around that age. And my boys, they go to a birthday party, they show up in their play clothes, and they're off running and they're playing, they're building forts and all these things. We get to the door, we knock on the door, and I open the door, and there's not a peep. There's not a sound. Oh, did I get the wrong day? Is the party not today? And they're like, yeah, no, it's okay. The bedroom door opened, and these six little girls all walked out in an orderly fashion in their little outfits. And I'm like, this is not a birthday party that I'm used to. So there's
Yeah.
very significant extremes. And often what we try to do is put them in a place that's most convenient for me rather than what's really in the best interest of the kids learning and learning styles and the social emotional piece and all that kind of stuff for sure.
Did you talk to your boys about that? Because I had a similar experience, and once I became aware of some of the things connected with, um, gender, I did talk to him, because I would see situations like that where I would see another adult reacting to him as if there was something as if he was going to do something wrong, or as if, he was going to get out of control, and I remember, having conversations like that. And I do with kids in the classroom too, just to help them understand that, you know, there's nothing wrong with them. Like when you talk about, feeling worthy, or there's nothing wrong with them. But sometimes I think without having that validated that there's nothing wrong with them, that they can really internalize that, and it has a very negative impact. What do you think about that?
I agree. And, for my boys are very, very big. One is 6'2.5", and the other one is 6'4". They've always been very big and they're solid. And so they've always been, the biggest in the class, and that they are the more rough and tumble boys that are out running and playing soccer and all those kind of things. And so we did have to talk about other people's perceptions of them, even often thinking they were older than they were. They were, yeah, too rough, too tumble, they weren't good kids because they weren't, following every word and order that I gave. I didn't want, we had to have a conversation about that. I don't want you guys to obey me. That's not good. I want you to respect me, but teaching my kids to obey, well, then they're going to obey other people as well. I want them to think for themselves. I want them to challenge me and say, well, why are you putting that rule in place? Explain to me the importance of it. That was really important to me, that they had that understanding. They were learning how to become critical thinkers and problem solvers, and not just regurgitating information that was being passed to them.
Yeah, it reminded me when you were saying that if there was one, really tip that could save you as a parent a little bit, is exactly what you're saying. I don't know when it was that I clicked into it or tried it and saw the success, and just made it part of my, parenting toolbox. But it was how when your child asks you to do something and it's not a good idea, and your first reaction is no, that's not happening. And again, wanting to not be top down, and trying to encourage those thinking skills, those problem solving skills. So I would always ask him, I would say, I don't think this is a good idea, and these are the reasons for that. But I'm open to hear, that kind of like have a debate with me, show me, explain to me. And sometimes actually, I would change my mind because it made sense what he was saying, and I hadn't had that in my perspective initially. But that was something I thought that it just saved so many issues, because often he would, you know, logically change his own mind. Like when he had to go through the process, why is it not a good idea to go down to the river and make a boat with those two pieces of wood you've got? And by him trying to convince me it was a good idea, he could actually see himself why it wasn't. So, yeah, I found it interesting when you were saying a very, very similar thing. Sabrina, now that you have adult boys, which is a new world, I find, and it's really interesting and can be very beautiful. What do you see in your boys that makes you really proud of how you raised them and how their core values have developed?
Um, I think that is part of it. They're good thinkers, they're good problem solvers, they're good decision makers. They are both also empathic. And so they're able to kind of see and try to understand other people's perspectives. They're willing to kind of help and look out for the kind of greater good, which I was growing up too, but I often did it at my own expense. I was more the helper to sacrifice. They seem to have a bit more of a balance of, yeah, I'm going to help you, but no, I can't now because I have my own things to do. So I think the other piece, yeah, actually just saying that right now, I think the other piece that kind of comes to me that makes me really proud of them is they have a good balance in kind of all aspects, their social life, their career life. You know, my dad's generation, they worked. My boys work, they put hard work into their work, but they also take time for themselves. They've got a good balance in their socializing, their relationships, their work, their schoolwork, their academics and their sports. They've got a really good balance, which is something that I really haven't seen a lot of up until more recently. And I think we talk about the millenniums and how they don't want to do anything. But I do see that in some areas, but I also see that there is just a lot more balance where they're like, I don't want to work 10, 15 hours a day until I'm 75 years old and drop dead. I want to enjoy my life right now. And I think, yeah, that's probably a really good idea and much more of a balance than working yourself to the bone for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I see that too, that it's and I know from like having younger teachers in, in the schools that I was in and not understanding completely their mentality. Like it's a different work ethic that they're coming in with. But that was one of the things that I really appreciated was they're willing to kind of fight for that balance, like not just to
Yeah.
say, oh, I'll put it on the back burner till I'm further up the ladder. So yeah, I think that's a very healthy thing. If you
Mhm.
were going to talk to a parent who is raising a young boy today in this world, what's something that you would tell them that you wish you had known when your boys were that young that would help them out?
So I think the first and the most important thing is work on yourself. The healthier you are as a parent, the more you're going to be able to be a positive influence for your child. That's by far, hands down, the most important thing. After that, I think it would be around the emotions. Start talking more about emotions. If you have a young child and you haven't really talked a lot about emotion, even starting to talk about emotions creates emotion. And so then I'm just going to climb up, not say anything, or the famous high school, junior high school is I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. So then it just kind of passes by them. But if we start talking about emotions more, even in third person, so it creates emotion for me to tell you what I'm feeling, but I can tell you what I think you're feeling. That doesn't create as much emotion for me. But really, I don't know what you're feeling. What I'm telling you is what I would feel if I was in your situation. So it makes it a bit safer to be able to start to talk about emotions. So that's what I would really start with is start, you're reading a book, ask, what do you think that character is feeling right now? A kid throwing a temper tantrum in the grocery store. Oh, what do you think they're feeling right now? So just talking more about emotions in general can be really, really, really helpful. And then you slowly can start talking to them about what they're feeling. It may be too broad, too overwhelming to talk about what you're feeling in general. But often if you say, oh, are you sad? They'll go, yeah, but they may not be sad, but they think that's what they're supposed to be. So often giving them, three, four, five different emotions to choose from. Now it's not as scary as all of them, but you're also not pigeonholing them into one as well. And just slowly start talking about those emotions rather than jumping over the emotions and trying to solve the problem to avoid feeling the emotions. Problem solving is still important, but it needs to come after the emotions. Sort through the emotions and then go, okay, what do you want to do? How do you want to handle that? What would be some good ideas, or what, here's a decision. What are the pros and cons of it, or whatever it is, and help them talk through where they are ultimately solving the problem. I'm not doing it for them. We build confidence by trying and doing. So every time I do for my kids, I take away an opportunity for them to build their confidence. So I don't want to solve for them. I want to support them as they're figuring out how to solve. That's when they're going to be building their confidence.
Yeah, that's very, very true, isn't it? Um, okay, I wanted to ask you one question before I go into something else, but um, because you have the gift of the longer lens of looking at raising children, the same as I do, in your opinion, often people go through certain stages with their children and they think, oh, this is the toughest. This is, and then they get to another stage and think, oh, wrong. That one was the toughest. And I th personally, I think each stage has gifts to offer and challenges. And sometimes I think it's the sometimes issues that are come up are because we get out of step with the new stage that our children are moving into or have moved into. From your lens, what would you say? What was the most challenging time as a mom of boys in your time?
I would say probably navigating the divorce from their dad. So just trying to figure out how do I support them and help them work through all that while I'm also trying to sort through and figure out all that and deal with all of that. Now be a single parent and figure out that financial responsibility and that balance with work and still get them to their extracurricular activities and all that kind of stuff. So it was a huge learning curve for me to figure out how do I parent as a single parent. And I didn't want to just I couldn't just focus on me. They were also struggling their life as they knew it, right? Our marriage was over, but that was only, a portion of my life. This was their whole life had changed. And so I needed to find that balance of being able to sort through and figure out what I needed to do so that I was able to be present for them while also trying to be there and support and be there for them. Um, but again, I kind of agree with you that the roughest stage really wasn't about them. It was about me trying to figure out how to navigate it for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. How old were they when the divorce happened?
They were 8 and 9.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So after that, because there's a long way from 8 and 9 to the mid 20s that they're at now. Was there any other time that you saw them struggling the most?
Sure. I mean, we all have ups and downs, right? So, struggling in their relationship with trying to navigate mom and dad's house, that caused sometimes there was ups and downs in that. Navigating relationships and breaking up with girlfriends, other friendships that were kind of changing. My one son moved away to go to university. My other son is still here. They had been away from me half their time and away from their dad half their time. They'd never been away from each other. So that was a piece for them as well. So, I think that's life. There's going to
Yeah.
be lots of ups and downs and ebbs and flows. And we've just gotten better and better at being able to kind of recognize it and talk about it and sort through it, where they're able to kind of feel the emotions that are there and kind of sort through it on the other side. So over time, those bumps have gotten a bit more smoother because we're navigating and managing them better, and they are getting better at navigating them themselves as well.
What would you offer to parents? Like what are some what's a quick tip or a quick strategy that could have a big impact in like them raising their boys right now?
One of the things I talk to my parents that I'm working with in my counseling is, what's your parenting goal? Most of us just react and respond in the moment. We think, I know what I don't want to do. I don't want to do what my parents do, but we actually don't have a goal. So actually sitting down and writing out a goal of what do you want your kids to be at the end of parenting? Write it down, stick it on the fridge. So you want your kids to be independent, confident, reliable, um, uh, empathetic, being able to feel their emotions, whatever it is, write it down, put it on the fridge. And then every decision you make, look at that and say, is this decision I'm making right now helping me reach the goal? If it is, keep going forward with it. If it isn't, challenge yourself and change that, right? So I want my kids to be confident, independent, reliant. I'm yelling at them. That doesn't fit my goal. That's not helping me get there. So I need to stop. But so many of us we're just trying to survive and get through the day. We don't actually stop and think about what's my parenting goal. Sure, I might have a financial goal, a work goal, but parenting goal, we don't talk about that as much. But it is vital in giving you a bit of a direction so you know where you want to go and what you want to do. You can check every single behavior looking at that goal if you're meeting the goal or not.
That's a really good point, a really good suggestion. Um, I remember, like when we were raising our son, not so much like I wish I had had that tip because I think I could have explored that a little bit as well. But I did make a conscious decision on, what was important for me to make sure my son, what tools did I want to make sure my son had so that he would experience success just as a human being, but especially as a male human being. And they were kind of generic. So because we we really can't foresee what the world is becoming for our children. So it was like, okay, stress. What do I want him to have in his toolbox? Well, I want him to love music and understand the power of music. I want him to understand the power of exercise to deal with emotions and love reading so that he can, um, do many, many, many things just by having a love of reading. But those were some of the core things. And those always helped me because, especially I think sometimes as parents, we can be overwhelmed with thinking, am I doing enough? You know, should I sign him up for this? Is he losing out because I'm not doing this? And maybe it's similar to setting your goals as a parent for how you want to parent. But for me, it was also setting goals for what I wanted him to have so that he would be, more successful in his personal inner life. Similar
Yeah,
things.
yeah, exactly. No, and often it's kind of these things that we maybe even, if we stop and think about it, we know what we want, but they're always rolling around back here. And like you said, I'm always worrying, am I doing a good enough job? I'm so busy. I've got this, I've got this, I got this. So we forget about that goal. And so in the moment, we end up reacting rather than making a conscious decision on how I really want to handle that. So having that goal written out where you can see it, on your mirror, on your fridge, wherever it is, where you're looking at it regularly helps you slow down and think through those decisions where we typically just react and hopefully make a more conscious decision. And I
Yeah.
can also react and then go, oh, geez, that didn't meet my goal. And I can go back and say, you know what? I didn't handle that very well.
Yeah.
I should have done something different in that situation. And that's part of my goal is teaching my kid responsibility. I want my child to see, oh, my mom screwed up. She made a mistake, and she was okay to come and own it to me and say, I screwed up. I shouldn't have done that. That's an important lesson for him to learn as well. So even though I didn't follow my goal, how I respond can also still help me meet that goal.
Yeah. It really is about being intentional, isn't it?
Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of, just for a few minutes, look at masculinity and males through the lens of your profession. So I remember when we were having a conversation earlier, you pointed out that because I have this image of, a typical man who is not reaching out for emotional help, is not going to the therapist, is not, dealing with those emotions that are, impacting the quality of their life. And you said something and it stuck with me, and I thought, oh, when we get on, I have to ask you to go a little bit more into that. But you said that you have noticed a significant change and that there are more men now that are reaching out for mental health, emotional support. What do you think is driving that change?
I think it's challenging the stigma that's been attached to it for so long and just talking more about it. We're talking more about anxiety, about depression, about mental health. That falls on men's ears too. And so I think we're seeing that more and more where it's okay. We're definitely seeing it more in our younger generation where it's not, oh, boys and girls, it's more, you have emotions. These are your emotions. So we're seeing it more, in the younger generation for sure. I remember I was selling my book at our farmers market here this past summer, and of course, had the book right on top, Not Good Enough, Understanding Your Core Belief and Anxiety. And this young guy, he was about 18, he came bouncing along. He's like, oh my God, I have that. And he slapped the book down, he picked it up, he started looking through all the pages. What is this? Tell me about it. And so we were talking about anxiety and what it feels like and all those. And he was totally engaged and he could have cared less who was around. But behind him was a man that was about 55 years old. And he just stood back like this. And he wasn't sure, didn't say a word, and he's just listening. You could see he's like, I want to learn more, but I'm not supposed to learn more. Right. And I was presenting a workshop in our community. So we were talking about that. The guy goes, okay, well, thank you. And he took off. And this older guy kind of got a little bit closer and says, that workshop's on Tuesday? And I said, yes, it is. He's good, but, and he took off.
Oh,
So
how beautiful is that?
yeah. So once they get, and that's what I find, like, what, when I first started my practice in 2010, I was lucky if I had 20 to 30% men that came in as clients. The vast majority were there begrudgingly because their wives, made them come into counseling. They wouldn't sit in my waiting room. They'd have to, they'd park a block or a block and a half away from my office, come running in with their hoodies up. But usually within 2 or 3 sessions of them gaining an understanding, they would be like, give me your business cards. I got to tell all my buddies about this. And then it was like they broke free from that stigma and they were just so open to learn and figure out what they needed to do. Now I'm about 50-50 for men and women. And it's men calling and just saying, I want to work on myself, whether they have a partner or not. They're coming more on their own because they're starting to understand now that they don't have to live up to that stereotype. They can choose to work more on their own mental health.
Well, I would think, I don't know how small your community is, but I would also think that I would think the reason you're getting more men reaching out to you is because they've heard you get them. So you're not perpetuating the stereotypes, that you're not just doing something superficial, that you do understand and you can give them support. So I think that's very exciting.
It is. And the model that I practice is different from a lot of counseling. So my counseling is not all, sunshine and rainbows and unicorns and, oh, it's going to be okay. I challenge, I question. We talk about science, what's happening in your body physiologically when you're going through anxiety. Let's make a chart of what your symptoms look like. So it's very kind of fact and science based, which men appreciate, and they like being able to take that tangible information home. So they do find it often it fits their needs for learning as well. It is more kind of a science-based approach where we're challenging our thoughts and looking at things in a bit of a different perspective for sure.
Wow. What are some of the common themes or some of the common core beliefs that the men that you're seeing are coming in with?
A lot of not good enough for sure.
Mhm.
A lot of anxiety masked as anger.
Yeah.
And so, I always say we don't really have an anger issue. We have an anxiety issue that we are masking and covering up with anger. So what we say about anger is not a standalone emotion. There's other emotions underneath the anger that I don't want to feel. Well, if I'm a man and I've been brought up being told that I'm not allowed to feel anything, and anger is something I am more allowed to feel. It's more socially acceptable to feel mad than any other emotions. Then whenever I start to feel anything, I'm going to switch it over to anger. And so anger works in pushing that emotions down. But also if my anxiety is going up, I get angry, people back off and leave me alone. So now my anxiety goes back down. So it becomes a very significant tool that we see a lot of people using. So we often see a lot of that piece that's there as well. Um, um, all kinds of unhealthy coping strategies, anger, alcohol, drugs, definitely lots of different things like that. Often feeling very unheard and very unappreciated by their wives. And interestingly enough, when I talk to the wives, they often feel very unheard and unappreciated. So we end up kind of creating this same dynamic where they're both often feeling the same thing, but just coming from two very different perspectives. So trying to get a better understanding of how that works can be really helpful for them as well.
Have you found any for like when you're talking to in especially couples, have you found any really good strategies for them to understand that men and women communicate differently and to help them with those communication skills?
We look at what each person needs. So often more men than women. Often men need a bit of time to just kind of think about things. It takes them a bit longer. I often talk about how, men are global to detail. So they think big picture first and then down to the little details. Women are the opposite. Women start with the detail and get to the global. So we need to take that into consideration when we're going to have a conversation where both people need to have time to kind of process and understand that information and be able to come back together. I often talk to my couples about, if there's conflict, the very first thing you need to do is take a break. When we start getting heated, we got too much cortisol in our brain. We have high levels of cortisol, our ability to use logic and reason, understand consequences, sequence events, connect to emotions, memory, not going to be there. So I need to take at least a 20-minute break, just let things calm down. Then I'm going to come back into the conflict, but with one purpose. My goal is for me to understand where you are coming from, and then for my partner to understand where I'm coming from. That's it. So I'm not even worrying about giving my opinion. All I'm doing first is trying to understand where you are coming from. Then the person repeats that. If we can get through that without conflict, then we go to the next step of, okay, now I want to explain my opinion to you. So we break it down into very small steps. First, we take a break. Then I'm coming to try to listen to understand that you. Then I'm coming to speak and have a voice and try to explain to you what's going on for me. And then the third part is, okay, so how do we work this out? What do we do here? How do we find a place that's maybe in the middle where both are kind of being understood to some degree? So breaking it down into really small steps often creates that. We often go into it, I'm going to convince you, convince you, convince you. But when the very first step is, my goal is to understand you, it changes that whole dynamic for sure.
Boy, doesn't that transfer beautifully into parenting?
Yes, for sure.
Like really, that's everything you were saying. It was like, wow, that would be a beautiful way to, interact with your child.
Yeah, that's if there's conflict, whether whoever it is, whether it's a boss and your staff or parents and kids or siblings, whatever it is, that is a really good process to go through where it just breaks it down. Sometimes it may take 2 or 3 days to get through all of that because it creates stuff. That's okay. Take another break, let that kind of process, think a bit about it, and then you come back again and try to work on it a bit more. The more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, very interesting stuff. I love the conversation. Before we end, I always ask my guests two questions, just kind of for fun. The first one is, what would be the title for a movie about your life up to this point? And then what would the summary or synopsis be?
Um, the title would probably be Never Stop Learning.
Mhm.
And the synopsis would be I'm always trying to learn new things. I've gone from being a teacher to being a parent, to being a parent and a teacher, to being a single parent, to being a school counselor, to starting my own private practice, to writing a book, to figuring out how to do social media and promote my book. There's always opportunities to learn out there, and just keep challenging yourself to learn new things. I always say I'm fighting Alzheimer's.
Well, I think I could co-star with you in your movie because it would certainly have a similar plot. Okay, the second question is I want you to picture yourself with one of your boys, and they are just getting ready to welcome in a child, a son, into their world. What advice would you have for them? What words of wisdom?
Um, Patience, be patient. Um, Keep working on yourself so that you can be the best, most present dad that you can be.
Mhm. Those are good ones. So before we do wrap up, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you really wish that we had have talked about?
I could go on for days and days and days.
Mm.
My book does talk a lot about that core belief, how it's developed and changed over the years. Talks about anxiety, how anxiety happens in our body, what's going on physiologically, strategies. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there that can definitely be of benefit. And I just think, I mean, whether it's my book or something else, engage, learn, constantly try to figure out new things, try to understand at a bit of a deeper level what's going on, why you're doing what you're doing. Everything we do for a reason. The more you understand why you're doing it, the more empowered you're going to be in making changes.
So where can people find you, find your book, find
Sure. So
connect?
my website is trobakholistic.org. And on my website, I have a link to all my book, where you can buy my book. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Chapters Indigo. I don't know what you guys have over there. It's on all the Amazons though. I have a blog on there, which is a 2 to 4 minute read just on different informations around mental health. I have a page on there that has all my podcast interviews that I've done. And so there's a lot of information on my website. I'm also on YouTube at Trobak Holistic Counseling and Facebook Trobak Holistic Counseling. And then I'm also on Instagram at NGE. So that's not good enough underscore Trobak. And I'm on TikTok at NGE underscore core underscore belief.
You're busy. That's a lot. Wow, good for you. Well, I'll make sure that all of that is in the show notes, and I do hope that people explore your work. And I find especially, I find it especially valuable when people go in and read those blogs. And because there's always, you can get some, like you said, it's all about learning, continuous learning, and just taking 2 minutes to read an article on a topic that for some reason you're drawn to can just have a big impact. So, for anyone listening, go to her website and find out what you can find out. So thank you again, Sabrina. I know how busy life can be, and I hope that you feel that I've honored your time today. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you, and I am sure that there are golden nuggets in this conversation that will help other parents along the road of raising their boys.
Thanks for having me.
And to all of our listeners, if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, the way we support our children and ourselves today shapes the next generation. Until next time, take care and keep unlocking the parenting code. If you're a parent raising a boy in today's complex world, be sure to explore sonhoodcoaching.com. You'll discover expert guidance and support designed to help you unlock your full parenting potential. As Amelia Gambetti says, this job is too difficult and too beautiful to do alone. Together we can explore this adventure and discover the magic of raising boys.